and this is the fourth part in a series of dealing with the challenges that we have. And this one, again, just like the previous one, number 3, is dealing a little with hashkafa and meaning and stuff like that, and less so than last time. And primarily it's because if we understand and if we have a next step, something we're going to do with this, then it makes it easier to deal with things. We feel like we're accomplishing, we are on a mission. So, and in addition, it's going to include many parental situations and stuff. So it's a little parenting as well. One of the phrases you hear today a lot is, life will never be the same. And I'm hearing that a lot. I assume you are too. Now, it may be true, but it's really difficult to say what does that mean and in what manner is it going to be different. And that's A, because I'm really just not sure. And B is because even those that say it, it means so many different things to so many different people. I also assume that a lot of people are not even sure what it means. The life will never be the same, I think, has simply replaced the good morning, how are you doing? It's just what you say to break the silence when you meet somebody and you start conversation. So that's what we do. Now, potentially though, when we say life will never be the same, it could be a true statement, but it may take a little help from us. And to make things different, it would require planning, because as always, things can be different, but they could be good different, or they could be bad different. Depends if it's in free fall. It depends if we could actually guide it and make sure that it is better, because things will never be the same, and here's where we're leading it to. So let me try a few suggestions how to go about it. The first one, I like the first one the best, and it's short. The first one is, before that, is one I want to challenge, though, when I say it may be different, because the nature of people is that whenever we are dumped on an emotional experience, so it affects us significantly, and we get hyped up on it, and the stimuli, and it gets us, and as a result, we think this feeling, I call it hysteria, whether it's positive or negative, is never going to go away. But the way emotion works really is it comes in with a bang and it leaves with a whimper, which means intellectual, logical information doesn't really excite us that much and doesn't even frustrate us that much. But it can stay with us for a more longer consistent. Hype, emotion, comes like with a fury, but then we forget immediately. And we all know the person that was ill and he committed to do a certain thing, and a week later he's back to normal. For 5 days he paid attention to his brachas or whatever it may be. So now what we need to do is we need to keep it with us, right? And certainly I have to say the positive end of it. There may be people coming out of this with a fear of the next crisis. Some people may have an exaggerated focus on people dying, so that we'd have to deal with. But if we leave that alone, what are we going to do that we could retain this message long after life settles down? So back to the first one, which is my favorite, and it's the shortest. And I think it's really the most on the mark. The first lesson you need to take out of this is you need to stay healthy. Okay, and you need to make a commitment to stay healthy. And interesting, I don't think it really gets mentioned that much, but the people that are most highly effective are people that are not healthy. Now, certainly there are people that are born with diabetes and it's not their fault. There are the people that don't take care of themselves. People that are not healthy, overweight, etc., are a much higher risk for being hurt or chas v'shalom dying. So one is, I think we need a commitment to be healthy. And I want to tell you an interesting story. I was at a levaya of a cousin years back, sitting next to my brother, and it was in June. Now this cousin was nifter from lung cancer, and he did a good pack a day for years. So by the levaya, the Rav chooses to talk about tznius in the bungalows, because it was June and there's always a challenge. The Flatbush family, some of them go. Not only Flatbush, I'm sorry for stereotyping, but I just know Brooklyn goes up more than others. And my brother turns to me and says, this is a speech for his levaya. The speech is, don't smoke. If you smoke, you're going to die. That would be a speech, and it would be a zechus for the nifter, because we can learn. So here too, we do need to keep ourselves healthy. I think it's past the point where we're going to joke about how we're overweight or how we never exercise and all that stuff. We should take care of ourselves. The second point I want to say is that while we're living with our children and our husbands and wives, and we're stuck together for all this amount of time, we have no choice but to try different parenting techniques, to compromise, to offer alternatives. We're trying to figure things out. Now is the time we should notice what works even though until now we thought maybe it was wrong. And for instance, there are some parents that insist that young children take a bath every night. They may have realized that if they do it every second night, they may have a breather and could go in the room and lie down for a half hour. That's a lesson. So you need to add that to your database and say, nightly baths are important, but every second night is not bad if I need to take a breather, right? There's so many things that until now have mattered. And while they're important, we may have thought that it's a basic need and not realize that we could cut it down 30% and we could still be okay. In this moment, we may have experienced that through no choice, but now we should maybe carry it into our personal database, which means we need to keep mental notes of what works, what doesn't work at all, what wasn't so good but we survived, and what seemed harmless but was catastrophic. That goes in our database. And while every day we're always learning new things, whether because we did something correct, or we made a mistake, or we observed from somebody else, right now there should be an increase in data entry into our personal databases of ourselves, our nature, our spouses, our children, human nature, so that we could then use these both till we get out of our being locked in the house, as well as we could use these years later because these are life skills. Normally we're rigid. This is what my parents did, and I'm doing it, or this is what my parents did, and I hate the way my parents brought me up, so I'm doing the opposite. But somebody once told me that the Chazon Ish said that by nature humans love extreme. So, but now, in compromise mode, we may be living not an extreme, and it may be working out. So if that's the case, take note of that. And therefore we should question everything that until now was not negotiable. So I'll give you another example. There are a lot of people in davening, and this may surprise some, that actually look at the phone during davening. Okay, that may surprise somebody that people do that, but there are a lot of people that do that. Now, many people, they're not davening with a minyan now, of course, and when they daven privately, they try to do a little better. So in their house, they actually take the phone and they put it on the side, right? So now they realize that even though with the minyan it was never negotiable to have their phone on them and to peek at it every once in a while, right now they may realize I can manage this and take this and go with it even when we get a minyan back in Master Shem very soon. Mothers may have thought you have to make real suppers, and she realized she could get away once in a while with scrambled eggs or something, and you know what, the kids wouldn't mind. Or, in my house, the way we did when my kids were young, we usually had supper, and then one night you could take whatever you want. One kid took cereals, one kid we made eggs, one kid this, and they were happy, and we weren't saying whatever you want, marshmallows, whatever you want from real food. And by being creative now, right, we may have learned a whole new array of parenting, which will calm us down, because instead of saying, oh my gosh, what should I do? I could either do this or this. Now, and in a year, 2 years from now, you could say, oh my gosh, what should I do? No problem. I could do this, etc., etc., etc. So here are other examples of things that till now maybe were not negotiable, not even on the radar, that because we're forced to deal with now, we could possibly consider in the future the same way. So for instance, there are many people that buy new clothing for Yom Tov, a lot of it, expensive ones. And you know what? We're not buying this Yom Tov simply because we're not going to a store. And we're managing. So maybe somebody could appreciate that. It could be negotiable. It depends if my husband got a raise. It depends if he got a bonus. It depends if I really need, etc. People can maybe appreciate those that have made simchas. You can make a sheva brachas at less than $75 a head catered. And I could survive, and I should spend more time with my kids, because that may have never been negotiable till now. But right now, when we're home all day, we're actually spending more time with the kids. And after the original panic, it's not so bad. And for the men, they could say, I actually, a lot of men are learning a little more now because there's some more free time. And they, I actually enjoy learning, and I see that I extract lessons that actually helps me see things in the world better. So then let's figure out what till now was not negotiable, never on the table, and now we're doing it because we don't have a choice, and it's not so bad. The third point I want to say is, to begin with Kehelas. He says, Toiv lo leches is beis ovel mi lo leches al beis hamishka. It is better, more effective for a person to go to a shiva call than it is to go to a wedding. And while it's not as much fun and exciting, what I presume he's saying is as follows. That when you go to a wedding, you feel good. You may even feel uplifted, simcha, klal yisrael. But none of that, it triggers, or generally doesn't trigger improvement in us. Somebody goes to a Beis Avel, it's obviously sad, but it forces us to reflect that people's lives are finite, and depending on the person's age, that you know what, they really need to figure things out because they've got another 10, 20, 30 years left, or whatever it may be, and that they should think about it. So, in a Avel's house, people should, and maybe they do once in a while, is they start picking and choosing what's really important in life. That's when we start getting serious. And even if now we're fortunate to know anyone that passed away, the fact that all of our lives are technically slightly at risk, right, should motivate us to figure out what's really important in life and what's not important. So the first thing, think, when we said that life as we know it is over and things will never be the same. It's like, what does that mean, things will never be the same? You and I know people are just going to forget unless we do not. So when we say things will never be the same, it means in my life, I will make it a point that things will never be the same. Or in my household, we're going to run it different, that things will never be the same. So tell me why it would be different. And here's a thought I want to share. That when we have significant events, what it does is it triggers or it brings up our instinctive priorities, which means as follows. If a person's in a near-death experience, right, and he decides he has to get his act together, what does he or she do? The answer is it depends. There's some people will gravitate towards Kavod Shabbos, some will gravitate to Torah, some will gravitate to Lashon Hara. And that because everyone's heart has an atiyah, a slanting towards a certain thing. That thing is based on his, her DNA and experiences and patterns and education, should have been when they were much younger, their personal life mission. But we don't make life missions, many of us, because we're busy and we're distracted and we're chasing after parnasa. Now, though, that instinctive mission, which we should have, may come to the surface again. Grab that and figure out what that is to you. Once you do that, you got to crystallize it, so to speak, with the one-liner. And you can't just say, well, I realize I need to be a better person. It's hard to map out a plan to be a better person. It's going to have to be something a little more specific. So I'm going to give you a few thoughts over here. And notice none of this is related to why this happened or why Hashem is doing this. It's really grounded, what should my next step be? So one of the things, as I mentioned this previously, that we don't really need as many extras as we thought we did. And as a part of that, a lot of things that we considered basic needs, that everyone needs to have, right, we could survive without. Now, I don't know what everyone calls basic needs. There are people that tell me the basic need is to go to Florida and Eretz Yisrael once a year. That's a basic need. Right? Others consider a basic need. Somebody told me that they are learning to do without. So when they got their new car, instead of a $70,000 car, they got a $40,000 car because they're learning to live without. So you have to know what you call basic needs and what you call, shall we call it, frills and privileges and stuff like that. But whatever it is, we are almost all getting used to that, to whatever degree we can do without. For instance, we don't have to eat out as often. We could buy clothing online instead of going to boutiques. There are a lot of things that now we're getting used to. But the point is not just to turn it into a single thing, turn that into a mission. We don't need purchases or even convenient purchases to make us happy. I could feel happy internally. I could feel happy because I can enjoy my kids' company. Don't just remove certain things from yourself, but turn into it. I'll give you an example. People are finding out you could marry your kids off for under $1,000. That's like a great deal. Okay? Now obviously, when this is all over, people will use wedding halls again. I'm not arguing. But it is fascinating how some people, and I know some exceedingly wealthy men, exceedingly wealthy, that made a wedding with 20 people. And they were just as happy. It is fascinating how when we experience something, we could get used to it, even if prior to that experience we never would have imagined it. The lesson is not that the next wedding the person makes he should make again in his backyard. Of course not. But the lesson is, this is not an urgent need. It's not even important. And it's the headspace which creates the mission. The headspace is that a chas and kala can enjoy the wedding because they enjoy each other's company. Or I can enjoy my house not because I have expensive items. I just enjoy my kids. Or I just enjoy being home. And we need to extract a mission out of all of this. The mission may be, I appreciate learning. I'm going to learn more. It's a mission. Figure out a mission. Now, if you've decided what your mission is, now you need to commit. So the way to commit is, and people do this all the time, if somebody decides they want to start exercising, they want to go to the gym, or they want to lose weight, what they do is they tell 3-4 friends. Now they're committed. They're embarrassed to back out. So they go and they've launched their mission simply by the fact that they made it public. So announce it to somebody, do something about it to move on. And then, even if it's going to take a month or two to implement, simply because you can't get out of your house, implement in a small way. If the commitment is to learn an hour a day of chavrusa, learn 5 minutes a day on your own. Do something, because as we all know, every day later you start decreases the chance you'll ever start. Finally is sustaining. Sustaining is difficult. The only way it'll be reasonable to believe you could sustain it, and that is if the mission actually speaks to you. You're not doing it because you're supposed to. You are doing it because you appreciate its value, why you should do it. And then if you could do that, be real to it. So for instance, when I say appreciate its value, somebody decides that the Shabbos table could be beautiful even if they don't drop $18, $22 a pound meats. Don't serve boiled chicken if you don't like boiled chicken. But instead of 3 types of expensive meats, go down with 1. So again, be reasonable, be practical, and do something that's meaningful to you. If we could do this even now, start working on this, so while we're getting cabin fever, right, we could at least feel there's something going on in our life. I see a long-term gain on my end of it. I see how it'll make me better. If we could do that, it'll have meaning.